Man, I am really excited to see Aizen's next transformation. I'm really hoping that Kubo has put all of his design talent into this thing. I mean, Aizen is the main villain after all, so I'm expecting something really cool here. Oh. He's a butterfly. Okay, so that wasn't quite what I was expecting, but I'm still hoping that they're going to have an epic fight worthy of Ichigo versus Aizen. I'm expecting this thing to go on for quite a while. I mean, I'm talking... Oh. It's over. That's it. DEICIDE is a mini arc that takes place at the very end of the Arrancar arc, consisting of 23 chapters dedicated solely to Aizen, the main villain, for pretty much the entire first third of Bleach. Now, the DEICIDE mini-arc chronicles Aizen as he goes ever closer to achieving his goal of wiping out Karakura Town, assassinating the Soul King, and becoming a being that transcends both Shinigami and Hollow. Essentially, it's a race against time as Ichigo trains with his dad in the Dangai to achieve a power greater enough to defeat Aizen and the Hogyoku, which is seemingly giving him a limitless supply of power. That sounds pretty awesome to me. Like, there's no way Kubo can mess this up. The Arrancar arc has been going on for a very long time, and people are waiting for this moment. They're waiting for the climactic showdown, for Aizen to finally get his comeuppance, and basically for the story to tie up in a satisfying way. Did that happen? Well, depending on who you ask, no. The DEICIDE arc is a big disappointment. I remember reading it on a weekly basis way back when, and I just remember the hatred and vitriol aimed at the series every single week. People were so disappointed with what was happening in DEICIDE, and a lot of that can be attributed to Kubo's treatment of his main villain, Aizen. In this video, I want to ask the simple question: did Kubo ruin Aizen's character in DEICIDE? To do that, we're going to take a deep dive look at Aizen's characterization in this mini-arc dedicated entirely to him and his final stand, and see what Kubo did right and what he did wrong, and ultimately see if Aizen remains in character during this time, or if he goes completely off the rails. Probably the easiest way to do this is to look at Aizen's different transformations over time, because he goes through a lot of them, and they almost all take place during these 23 chapters. Before we get started on that though, guys, I just have to say a huge thank you for 4,000 subscribers. At the time of recording, we've just hit that number. I didn't even get a chance to say thank you for 3,000 in a video, for crying out loud. I don't really know what else to say at this point, but I am going to say that I want to kind of expand the community surrounding this channel. So I do have a Twitter account for my YouTube channel. I don't really use it at all, but I'm going to try and get better at doing that. So that's down in the description below. The link to that, if you want to hit follow on there, that's a great place to engage with me about Bleach. But also in terms of other announcements, future announcements, I am making a Discord for this channel as well. I have heard a couple of you guys saying that you'd love to have that on here so you can chat about Bleach with other fans. That's something I definitely want to do. Hopefully the Discord will be ready to go by the time I even get the next video out. So that's really exciting stuff. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button to join the conversation. Join us Bleach fans in supporting the franchise. I'd love to have you. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, hit like. It really helps with the exposure. And also the notification bell. Didn't forget that this time. Hit that and you should stay up to date with all my videos. So if we're analysing the character of Aizen during the DEICIDE period, I think the best way to do that is actually to begin before DEICIDE. Now DEICIDE takes place from chapter 399, almost until the literal very end of the Arrancar arc. Now bear in mind that this arc has been going on by this point for over 200 chapters. People have invested a lot of time into this arc. Me personally, I was reading Bleach on a weekly basis from the Kenpachi versus Noitara fight, so I had been reading it for a very long time. I went through the entire fake Karakura Town arc, where Bleach was, you know, a lot of people thought it was quite slow at that point, and I totally get that. And I was expecting some great stuff, especially out of Aizen, who is my favourite character in the series. However, I am going to look at his characterization completely objectively in this video, because there is plenty of stuff I didn't like about the way Aizen was handled towards the end of the Arrancar arc, and it'll be interesting to see if you guys think that his characterization was completely botched, or if you think the Aizen we know and love came out the other end all right. So, before the DEICIDE arc then, Aizen has been pretty consistent in the way he has been characterized by Kubo. He's very, very powerful, very, very clever, and very, very arrogant. Those are pretty much the three main things that make up Aizen as a character. Aizen is almost always the smartest guy in the room, and he knows it as well. In some way, he is the mad scientist archetype to a lesser degree than characters like Mayuri and even Kisuke, but Aizen is definitely there, although he has kind of got the inferiority thing with Kisuke going on much in the same way as Mayuri. However, Aizen has always been single-mindedly driven by ambition and his desire to become pretty much the most powerful being in Soul Society and beyond. Aizen's dream of breaking the boundaries between Shinigami and Hollow to become a being that transcends that has been pretty much his motivation from day one, even back in Turn Back the Pendulum when he was conducting hollification experiments on his unwitting victims. One of the many through lines to Aizen's character is how he has meticulously planned out almost every single thing that has happened in Bleach so far, and I mean literally everything. Like even the meeting of Isshin and Masaki, Aizen had kind of some hand in that, and Ichigo's eventual birth and his creation and how powerful he is. The fact that Aizen planned literally everything became such a massive meme. He's definitely a huge reason Bleach was as popular as it was. So just before DEICIDE is when we get the big fight where Aizen faces off against the Gotei 13, and in my opinion, that is peak Aizen. He's smart, he's cocky, he's talking down to all of the captains, and you get the single best Kyokusui moment in the entire series when he makes Hitsugaya stab Momo, and you get the immortal line, "When were you under the impression I wasn't using Kyokusui?" It's the trolliest thing Kubo has ever done in my opinion, but it's trolling in good nature, and it's the best Aizen moment in the series. The reason for this is because it is everything that Aizen is. It's deceptive but smart, but also funny. It's so funny because he laughs in the face of basically the rest of these characters. Aizen was such a powerful, untouchable villain that Kubo made a huge deal out of Shinji hitting him once. Once Aizen does away with the Gotei 13 and the Espada are out of the picture, Tosen is dead, Wonder Weiss is dead, and it's pretty much just Ichigo and his father versus Aizen and Gin, that is when DEICIDE begins, and the Hogyoku begins to play a bigger role in things, and it's from here that things start to change. Seemingly out of nowhere, Kubo decided that the Hogyoku was actually going to be a sentient life form that can apparently grant the wishes of people around it. This plot device pretty much came out of thin air. I remember people calling it a Deus Ex Machina even back in the day. Apparently the Hogyoku is the reason Orihime has powers, Chad has powers. Yeah, it's an absolute mind-blown moment that honestly doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. The fact that the Hogyoku, otherwise known as the Breakdown Sphere, used to be basically just a way to create Vizards or Arrancars is now this like god ball that can basically do anything. Very, very weird. And it was the start of a decline for Aizen's character. Aizen's fighting Isshin, and apparently he claims to have met his limit as a Shinigami. Doesn't make any sense. I wonder if maybe Kubo had bigger plans for Isshin's power level back in the day, because when you find out in Thousand Year Blood War that Isshin is effectively just a regular captain, even though he is of noble blood, it doesn't make any sense that Aizen is tiring out against this guy. He should be absolutely demolishing him. Why isn't he using Kyokusui? No, Aizen is in fact beginning to rely solely on the Hogyoku, and it's this change in mindset that people really didn't like back in the day. Kubo began piece by piece dismantling everything people loved about Aizen. When Urahara arrives on the scene and you get the smartest guy show up, Aizen begins to change even further. Urahara is capable of damaging Aizen on a degree that the rest of them weren't really, but Aizen is currently undergoing a process of transformation. He is becoming a cocoon to evolve even further. It's at this point where the first of Aizen's real personality changes begin. Aizen states in a now famous line that many people believe to be the embodiment of this personality change, "Allow me to be careless, for I no longer have any reason not to be." And it's this idea that Aizen has become so powerful that he doesn't need to prepare, he doesn't need to plan, and he simply doesn't need to care about the opponents he's facing. And of course, to a degree, he's right. Aizen is evolving way beyond these guys at this point. When he's a cocoon, he's able to fight Isshin, Yoruichi, and Kisuke with pretty much minimal difficulty. And I totally get where Kubo was going from with this personality shift, but it does feel out of character for someone who arrived on the battlefield with a shield at the back of his neck just to protect himself from any kind of attack. It's difficult to swallow that Aizen would go from that to attacking Urahara without even the slightest second thought mere chapters later. The problems don't just lie with Aizen's personality either. Kubo did not do a fantastic job with Aizen's designs during this fight, and it's a real big shame. Now, I completely get where Kubo was coming from with Cocoon Aizen. It's a pretty cool concept, really taking this idea of evolution very literally, but there's no denying he looks kind of ridiculous. I remember trying to justify it to myself back in the day. I was like, he looks cooler. He looks almost like a ghost, but no, he does look pretty ridiculous. And I remember the comments, just people were mocking the main villain of the story. It doesn't matter how powerful he is. The manga is obviously a very visual story, and Aizen was the butt of the joke. There was some cool stuff sprinkled in, however. When Isshin manages to damage Aizen's cocoon, it's really cool and eerie that there's apparently nothing in there apart from like this massive moving Reiatsu. So apparently Aizen's body is quite literally reforming in that. However, it's weird then that when he emerges from the cocoon, he just has long hair and differently coloured eyes. Now, I know obviously his Reiatsu is now off the charts as well, but I did expect a slightly more drastic transformation, although I do think that this version of Aizen is probably my favourite during DEICIDE. As a friend of mine said, when he was in the cocoon and, Isshin broke it, that was scary, but when he came out, he was just fabulous. Now, obviously, Aizen's power level is pretty much off the charts at this point. He has emerged from his cocoon as, you have to assume, the transcended being that he always wanted to be, but the Hogyoku seems to be firmly in control here. Aizen hasn't also used Kyokusui once at this point since the sword began to fuse with his hand, again supposedly a sign of true transcendence. Aizen then goes to Karakura Town, and this is when the plot elements of DEICIDE begin to drag it down as well. So we've covered not only Aizen's personality beginning to change, his designs starting to look a bit stupid, and now we're on the plot. I remember reading the Arrancar arc and just being so excited for the eventual showdown between Ichigo and Aizen, or whatever the final battle of that extremely long story arc was. So you can imagine my pretty tepid disappointment when it basically just consists of Aizen chasing a couple of Ichigo's school friends around the streets, doing absolutely nothing. This sort of thing is what I will never really understand. I don't understand why Kubo thought that was exciting. There's no way Aizen was ever going to kill Ichigo's school friends. They're regular humans. It would just be really dark if they just up and died. So that was never going to happen. So instead, you have Aizen aimlessly wandering the streets of Karakura doing absolutely nothing when he should be just creating the King's Key at this point, but he's doing nothing at all. He's finally exactly where he wants to be, and he has killed like maybe 6 random stragglers. So at this point, the threat level is like down here. Really, it should be like, whoa, Aizen's actually made it to Karakura Town. No one is there to stop him. This is horrible. But it's not, because he's just not doing anything. We then get a really cool part where Gin betrays Aizen. And I know everyone loves that moment. It is a great moment, and it did feel quite earned. It was a really cool twist. And then Aizen transforms again, and this is probably the most egregious one in my opinion. At this point, it's clear that the Hogyoku is acting on its own to save Aizen from death. Aizen transforms into a butterfly, and this is the part where I remember thinking, okay, I actually don't think that looks very cool. Aizen's butterfly transformation is probably one of the single worst looking transformations in the series, in my opinion at least anyway. But I've really not found many people who like it online. I get it, again, Kubo's going for a very literal evolution metaphor. Aizen emerges from his cocoon as a butterfly, except he wasn't a butterfly a minute ago, he just had long hair. So I don't know why this transformation is forced upon him now, and I kind of wish Kubo had just gone the full-on religious route and made Aizen look like an angel instead. That would have been way more fitting. Instead, he is like a butterfly. So I was not a big fan of that at all, and at this point Aizen's personality is now almost completely gone. The previous Aizen that we all knew and loved, that was meticulous in his planning, that was careful, doesn't care at all. He even mentions to Gin that the fear of death has been removed from him entirely, and so now he doesn't have anything to worry about at all, and he's become this being that is so powerful, but yet so far removed that he doesn't feel like Aizen at all. And yet, on the flip side of that, he's still achieving nothing. The only person he's killed so far is his own former teammate. You can see why people were frustrated. Nothing was happening in DEICIDE. Nothing was happening. Except Aizen was just continually transforming, each one kind of getting wackier than the last, but more importantly, each one removing us further from the Aizen we knew and loved more and more. Then, of course, you all know what happens next. We reach the actual finale of the Arrancar arc. Ichigo arrives, frankly looking amazingly cool, from his Dangai training with his father, and he has a fight with Aizen. And I remember thinking, this should be amazingly cool. Like, we've sat through all the stuff with his friends, we've sat through the Karakura stuff. You have no idea how disappointed I was when Don Kanoji turned up. I remember, maybe you remember if you read this weekly, but the mysterious stranger arriving to fight Aizen, I was really hyped. The thoughts going through my mind, I was like, maybe it's Ryuken, maybe it's the Zero Division are actually doing something. I genuinely was crushingly disappointed when it turned out to be Don Kanoji. I was like, what are you doing, Kubo? You know, it takes a lot. I am a self-confessed very big fan of this series. Evidently, it takes a lot for me to think that Kubo has made a huge mistake. That was definitely one of them. Don Kanoji showing up completely killed the tone of the moment. It should have been the most dire moment of the Arrancar arc, but it was all being played for a weird joke. The Gin stuff was good. Everything else has been really bad at this point. So it's not hard to see why people are very disappointed with the direction Kubo has taken Aizen, but maybe we'll get a great fight out of it with him and Ichigo. Alas, while the fight is decent, it's incredibly short and it's incredibly one-sided. Kubo has been building Aizen and building him for so many chapters at this point, and Ichigo just tears him apart in 2 chapters. If this was a satisfying conclusion to the Arrancar arc for anyone, I have yet to meet them. Kubo has a real problem with padding out earlier moments in the story, with good stuff admittedly, but not leaving enough time for the important conclusions. The exact same thing happens in the 1,000 Year Blood War arc. Here though, it is painful to watch because Aizen is a legendary character. He's one of Bleach's best characters, and I just don't think he is done justice in the slightest here. Now, admittedly, his final transformation is pretty cool. It's like an eldritch creature, his face is like pulled apart, and it is actually really creative. But again, it does showcase Aizen at his furthest from what I expected him to be. You know, I was kind of hoping we'd get Aizen's Bankai, I was kind of hoping we'd get something like that. Although I like this transformation, although I like the final Getsuga Tensho, is this fight what anyone wanted for the final battle of the Arrancar arc? I would be really surprised if it was. Aizen's character now has divorced so far from what we knew, is it even really him anymore? And so I have to ask the question I posed at the start of this video, did Kubo ruin Aizen's characterization? And I have to say no. I personally think that most of what Aizen does in this arc is actually pretty in character. Even him absolutely losing his mind at Ichigo during this fight, and I'm talking loses it, especially in the anime where he goes completely mad. But during this fight, he just goes absolutely crazy at Ichigo, he just launches into a tirade at him. And what's really interesting about Aizen's attitude during this fight with Ichigo is the way he is constantly trying to justify the events of this fight to himself. Clearly at this point he has become so delusional that he cannot comprehend how Ichigo is able to keep up with him at every moment and even eventually surpass him. And actually I really like that. I like how Aizen's justifications become more and more absurd the longer the fight goes on, to the point where he's like, oh, you've discarded all of your Reiatsu just in order to fight me with physical strength. Like, is that even a thing? Is that possible? Or has Aizen just come up with that on the fly as an excuse for why he's losing? I really liked that. I thought it was really cool. And in fact, the majority of DEICIDE is Aizen's delusion about his endgame, essentially, about where he's headed. It seems kind of obvious to us that he is devolving rather than evolving. He's becoming the monster that he wanted to avoid. When Ichigo discovers that he has the Hogyoku inside him, and that he can high-speed regenerate, Aizen mockingly says, do you really think I would hollow-find myself? And of course, no, we don't. Aizen is way too proud, clearly sees the hollows as some kind of lesser race. But here, Aizen has become that monster. And I think that was quite fitting. He has done so utterly blindly. He has no idea that he has become this creature that he didn't want to be, and Ichigo is the creature that he did want to be. And I think that is actually really well done. The fight is definitely not long enough, but I think that is actually really well told. I think it's obvious to us as a reader that Aizen is having some kind of breakdown, but it's not obvious to him, and I think that is what's really interesting here. So the term villainous breakdown is a trope in writing. It basically means that almost inexplicably, a bad guy will just lose their mind and go completely mad, fly into a rage, and actually Bleach is really bad for this trope. There are some characters that have villainous breakdowns that just don't make any sense. One of the main ones for me, a lot of the Quincy did this, a lot of the Sternritter had villainous breakdowns, as not cool, calm, calculated, until apparently Byakuya mocks him just a little bit and he flies off the handle for no reason whatsoever. Masked Masculine is another one. He gets his arm broken and apparently it's enough to just completely send him into a rage. Gerard Valkyrie, Lil Barrow, all these guys go completely mad the moment they're backed into a corner. The villainous breakdown trope is one we see a lot in Bleach, and with Aizen, I think it's the only time it's actually warranted and it actually makes sense to the character. If we look at the Aizen that we do know and love, we know he is a master schemer, a master planner who has planned 10 moves ahead. The only thing he hasn't counted for are the unknown variables, Ichigo's power and Urahara's own planning. Now imagine if you were Aizen and you had been planning for like a century at this point, that your plan to ascend to the throne of Soul Society, you've been doing holification tests for ages, risking everything for this, by the way, and then some human kid comes along and you can't defeat him. Not only can you not defeat him, you can't comprehend how he is able to be stronger than you. I think it's perfectly fair that Aizen would be trying to justify his way out of this situation, and I think it's also perfectly fair that the moment Ichigo basically says no and just cuts him, I think Aizen would lose his mind, and he does lose his mind. I think it's very interesting actually to see that breakdown, because to me it was a rare villainous breakdown that actually felt quite natural. Aizen's transformations are a slightly heavy-handed way of showcasing his becoming the monster he actually is. I think the personality changes are a more subtle and more interesting way to see how Aizen changes throughout the course of DEICIDE. So I think the reasons people didn't like this arc and didn't like what happened to Aizen are an unfortunate perfect storm. Everything happens very quickly. Aizen goes through like 5 transformations in the space of about 20 chapters, which is insane. Insanely fast for a series known for going insanely slow. Not only that, but I think people did miss the fact that we didn't really get a proper fight with the Aizen we all wanted to see fight. That was a big shame too. And I think Kubo himself probably realised he made a slight mistake with Aizen, because if you notice, Thousand Year Blood War Aizen, although he doesn't appear very much, is basically pre-Deicide Aizen, apart from the fact that he has the super strong Reiatsu surrounding him. But apart from that, personality-wise, there is no trace of Deicide Aizen. And so there you have it really. That's a deep dive look at Aizen's characterization throughout the Deicide arc. He obviously gets humbled very hard by Kisuke at the end, and clearly in prison manages to find who he once was. I love that he essentially lost everything about himself at the end through his own mistakes, including his Zanpakuto toe, although apparently he inexplicably gets it back in Thousand Year Blood War, so I just have to assume they kiss and made up. But I like the fact that he gave up Kyokusui Getsu for greater power, but it does seem short-sighted for the character who thought of it all. So I can totally see both sides, and like I said, I didn't like some of his transformations. I thought they looked a bit, they looked pretty dumb, to be completely honest with you. And I didn't like the rapid pace of everything that happened, and I didn't like the fact that nothing happened in Karakura Town, the fact that that was the extent of Aizen's threat level. You're telling me this guy who can wipe out the Gotei 13 can't pick off a couple of kids. That was when Kubo got pretty self-indulgent. But in terms of Aizen's characterization, my answer to my own question is no. I don't think he ruined the character. I think he pushed it a bit too far at times and made a couple of missteps. But overall, I think Aizen's villainous breakdown, his mindset, the place his mind went, was all very in character, and it made a lot of sense for the guy who thought he had it all. Imagine having it taken away from you at the last minute by something you cannot understand. That, to me, was actually a very interesting character study of Aizen, which I think essentially is what DEICIDE is. DEICIDE was Kubo pulling apart this perfect being that he had created and, you know, bringing him down a couple of notches. And I thought that was really, really interesting. That's it for this video, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below if you agree with my take. Maybe you hate what happened to Aizen in that arc, and to you he's never been the same since, despite the fact that in the final arc he's basically just a rehashed version of his pre-DEICIDE self. So let me know, guys. I'd be really interested to see what you think. I hope you enjoyed this video essay, essentially, on Aizen's characterization during the DEICIDE arc. If you did like it, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We've got Bleach content coming every week. I really appreciate the support. But until next time, guys, I'll catch you later. See you then.